All right, this is week 3 of advertising and media communications. As you know, we've started out with the first 2 weeks being the overview of media communications. In the last week, we talked about different components of media communications. And this week, we're going to talk about campaigns. Obviously, this week is very important because next week, you and your team are going to work on a media campaign, which is a very big project, and so this, of course, is an important week to prepare you for that. We have 3 objectives for this week to be able to develop a media campaign proposal, and we're going to show proficiency in that next week with our teamwork or our team project. We're also going to be able to recommend media strategies to achieve business communications goals, and we're going to be able to analyze the impact of regulations on media campaigns. Now, when we talk about media campaigns, first thing we need to do is we need to look at textbook versus reality, and we need to keep in mind that what is listed in a textbook for a media campaign doesn't always happen in reality, and typically it's because of the budget. Usually, given unlimited resources, we would be able to do what's in a textbook, but that's not the case. Generally, budgets are tight, especially recently in today's economy. And not only that, but time is also important. To really do a good campaign and to be as thorough as possible, it takes time to build up all the research that is needed. So in lieu of that, you cut corners and you make assumptions. Sometimes those work out, obviously sometimes those don't. Now the preliminary process begins with planning and research and developing strategies. Now we've talked a little bit about research in our class, and remember that there are 2 types of research. There's qualitative, which is research that's based kind of around feelings and assumptions and big picture. And there's quantitative, which has actual numbers, like X% of this number of people said something. That's a quantitative study. An example of a quantitative study is a telephone survey. An example of a qualitative study is a focus group. Now, there are different components of a media strategy or a media campaign. First, you have the executive summary, and that gives you a basic overview of what your campaign is going to have in it. Next, you have the situational analysis, and this is where you look at your research to determine kind of where you are. There are different types of analyses that you can include here. There's the SWOT analysis, which is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and sometimes you include trends there. Sometimes you don't. Depends on your preference and what you plan to what you intend to do with your research. You've got sales history, pricing practices. You've also got your target market, primary target market and your secondary target market. And you've also got your marketing mix decisions, which include the 4 P's, which is price, product, place, which is your distribution, and then promotion, which is your marketing and advertising. Then you've got your advertising objectives, kind of your goals, what you want to accomplish with your media campaign. And then you've got an advertising strategy. And there are a lot of different types of strategies. You need to determine your marketing position, how you can differentiate your product from your competitors. And as one of the threads in our this week explained to us, there are only 2 ways to promote a product. It's either from differentiation or price leadership. So that's an important consideration. And then you get a life cycle of your advertising campaign. How long do you expect it to last? Moving on, you also have the communications media included in the media campaign. And that's the types of media that you want to include: your television, radio, newspapers, magazines, Um, Outdoor, direct mail, digital media, publicity, which is public relations, and other types of advertising tools, which would be like trade shows, promotional items, uh, appearance in movies, event sponsorships, things like that. Next on your list of media campaign components is your creative strategy, and that's what types of visuals are you going to use? What type of campaign are you going to use? Are you going to have a slogan, a logo? Um, and you would create advertising and television storyboards there. Very important is your budgeting. Now, in a lot of cases, your budgeting is going to drive the other items on your list. So although it's lower down in the list here, it's one of the first things that you're going to need to work on. Your timeline, of course, determines when things are going to happen. You can base it on the sales cycle, on your product life cycle, or even around a special event. And then, of course, you have evaluation. Now, evaluation, to truly evaluate, you've got to have a baseline. In other words, you want to do some evaluation studies at the beginning of your campaign so that at the end of it, you can run those same studies to benchmark against those to determine which one is, which things have been successful and which haven't. Now let's talk a little bit about media buying. Now there are tons of different ways to buy media and different places to buy media. Broadcast has a lot of different parts to it. You've got things called day parts, which are like AM drive time, prime time, nightly news. Those are the parts of the day that you would buy advertising around. You also have syndication, which is buying shows that are repeats, that are perpetual repeats. There aren't any new ones coming out. And you see those, they're on in the early evenings and the late afternoon. With the World Wide Web, there are a lot of different buying considerations there. You have banners, you have pop-ups, you have sponsored links, you have advertising sponsors. And of course, measurement is really important with any of these so you can determine how successful you're being with your campaign. Now, some other things to remember are reach and frequency. Those are important. The reach shows how many people you are reaching with your marketing. Frequency is how many times they're seeing that ad. Now, a targeted reach says, okay, instead of just reaching people in general, your targeted reach is the number of people in a specific age group or in a specific demographic that you want to reach. Pay per click or a click-through ratio, that is one way to measure internet advertising. If people click on your ads, and you pay for it by the number of clicks, that's a pay per click. You also have counters. In other words, how many people see that ad, and that's another way that that people pay for and buy internet advertising. There's also in television and all types of media, there's audience feedback. You have ratings. In television, there's the Nielsen ratings. In radio, there's Arbitron. There are lots of different types of rating systems. With internet, there's pay-per-click. And then there's a company called DoubleClick that actually places a lot of web advertising. Now, to improve web exposure, one thing that's become popular lately is search engine optimization. What you want to do is you want to have search engines list you at the top of their list whenever people search for terms. So people make it their whole job to work with companies to optimize their websites for search engine optimization. Now, obviously, there's a great impact of regulations and laws on media communications. Private groups impose rules on their membership. For example, lawyers have a whole set of rules around lawyer advertising. Healthcare is another one that has had a lot of rules. As a matter of fact, until the mid '80s, it was against the law for healthcare providers to advertise on television, for example. Now, publicly, you've got the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, that determines advertising based around the stock exchange. You also have the FTC, which regulates advertising to children and also monitors for deceptive practices. And you've got the Federal Communications Commission, which is the FCC, which you've probably heard of, which has governance over deceptive practices as well as cable television. So that's week 3, and if you have any questions, of course, post any questions you have to the thread. Thank you.